Wagyu beef from Australia is a top priority in the Senate this week, or in Congress this week. Very interesting. Do you know what your congressman did this week? 138 different bills and resolutions were introduced in the United States House of Representatives this week. I went through the list and pulled out a couple that I think are interesting. Not all of them are groundbreaking or getting the press coverage that others are, but I still think it's worth talking about. This is something I liked to do when I was reporting and writing more, going through what's on congress.gov and seeing what different congresspeople are prioritizing at this point in the legislative session. There will be some names that you recognize, but there will be some that you maybe don't unless you live in those states. It's another good way to kind of see what's going on past the mainstream headlines. So with that, let's get started. This week, Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky announced that he would be introducing H.R. 2356, or the Dual Loyalty Disclosure Act. This act would amend the Federal Election Campaign Act and require that anyone seeking elected office would disclose that they have multiple citizenships and to which country their second citizenship is held. This is interesting because it would also make it a public disclosure. So anyone who is seeking information of the candidates would be able to confirm if they have any other citizenships. Thomas Massie said, dual citizens elected to the United States congressman should renounce their citizenship in all other countries. At minimum, they should disclose their citizenship in other countries and abstain from votes specifically benefiting those countries. If we are going to continue to allow members of Congress to acquire and retain citizenship in other countries, they should at least be required to disclose to voters all countries to which they consider themselves citizens. Massie's bill is being co-sponsored by Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona, Congressman Clay Higgs of Louisiana, and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. This bill obviously is a focus on national security and election integrity. They want there to be more information for voters. They also want to ensure that anyone who wields power in the U.S. prioritizes America over any other country. Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks of Iowa introduced H.R. 2305, which titled, to provide funding to the Bureau of Prisons, States, and Localities to carry out mental health screenings and provide referrals to mental health care providers for certain correction officers. In a statement, her office noted that this is a reintroduction of the Corrections Officer Blake Schwartz Suicide Prevention Act, and its aim is to promote mental health and support correction officers across the country. The bill establishes a grant program through the Department of Justice to fund mental health screening and referrals for officers in federal, state, and local facilities. This bill offers the memory of Blake Schwartz, a dedicated corrections officer at the Thompson Correctional Center in the Quad Cities, who tragically died of suicide 2 years ago today. This legislation seeks to ensure no other officer faces the same struggle alone. In a statement, Miller Meeks said, I've met with Blake's widow, visited the Thompson facility he worked at, and spoken directly with officers who are carrying the weight of this job without the mental health support they need. 2 years ago today, Blake's life was cut short. His story is a painful reminder that we must do better. This bill takes action to get corrections officers the resources they deserve, break the stigma around mental health, and prevent future tragedies. Congresswoman Miller Meeks introduced this bill for the first time last year. I am fascinated by this. I would love to know more about any sort of bipartisan effort that's being made to support this. I think we hear a lot about mental health support for people who commit crimes or people who are in prisons. It is interesting to see the other side of saying those who are working in prisons, those who have to deal with very tense issues that go on there deserve support as well. In a similar theme, Congressman Mike Bost of Illinois introduced H.R. 2283, which is titled, to direct the Secretary of Veteran Affairs to carry out a pilot program to provide grants to outpatient mental health facilities for the provision of culturally competent, evidence-based mental health care for veterans and for other purposes. I don't have a lot of information on this. As of this recording, the text hasn't been submitted to congress.gov, and I don't have any information on co-sponsors. Also, Mike Bost's team have not put up a statement or a press release on his website about it. So it's definitely one that I would like to see more about. I hope that they are providing more information soon. But it seems like mental health is on the mind for several Republicans in Congress right now. Congressman Gregory Stobe of Florida introduced House Joint Resolution 81, which would authorize the use of military force against certain cartels. This joint resolution has been referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs. In a statement, the congressman's office noted that this would authorize the use of military force against at least 9 different gangs, including Tren de la Agua. In a statement to Fox News, Congressman Stobe said, We can no longer ignore these deliberate invasions of Mexican drug cartels into our neighborhood and communities. These are not ragtag bands of low-level lawbreakers, but organized criminal enterprises that profit off death and addiction. Far too many innocent people have suffered at the hands of cartels. Until such time that the Mexican government finally steps up and squashes the cartels who use Mexico as their home base, Congress must give President Trump and Secretary Hegseth the green light to take a sledgehammer to these criminal networks and supply chains. My joint resolution will authorize the Trump administration to use the full force of the American military against the 9 largest drug cartels operating out of Mexico. The congressman expands on the damage done to America by the Mexican drug cartels in the text of the bill. He notes that cartels have enabled the entry of terrorists into the United States, a serious violation upon the sovereignty of the American people. That such cartels have smuggled cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, and other illicit drugs in the United States, that the opioid overdose epidemic has resulted in the deaths of millions of Americans, including an average yearly death rate of more than 110,000 per year at the height of the Biden administration, and that cartels have established human trafficking networks facilitating the sexual exploitation of children and women. And he also notes that the government of Mexico has demonstrated an inability and a negligible willingness to dismantle such cartels that have committed the most violent atrocities upon the American people. Personally, I think that we should be able to use military force to stop invasions at the border. I think that we need to take our border security more seriously than we do. It's not just the Mexican drug cartels that are the problem. There's a lot of other nations that see our southern border as sort of an open way to get into the U.S., and especially under the Biden administration, it had a very lax reputation. So I like this bill a lot. I'm curious to hear what you think. A bill that I'd like to learn more about is H.R. 2300. It was introduced by Congresswoman Diana Harshberger of Tennessee. And the title it has on congress.gov is to ensure national uniformity with respect to certain requirements related to preterm infant formula and for other purposes. For other purposes seems almost ominous. Infant formula has been one of these sort of hot items in America, I think, as a lot of moms make decisions about sort of Maha style, about what the quality of ingredients they want to give their newborn baby is. There's, at least personally, I've seen a lot of discussion about it. But also we had really serious infant formula shortages during the pandemic and then during the sort of shockwaves to the economy afterwards. So I would like to know more about this. I don't see the text at this time on congress.gov. She doesn't have a statement on it on her website relating to this. I will double check like X and other places to make sure I'm not just missing it somewhere. The bill was introduced on March 24th, and the last thing on her website has to do with the Bipartisan Fair Act on March 25th. Maybe her staff is preparing something. If you know anything about it, I'd love to see a link because I'm curious. I think this is something that I suspect has a lot to do with some of the unifying energy on all sides of the political spectrum about the quality of our food. Maybe this is something that we need to hear Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talk about as well. I'd be curious. If anyone knows anything about it, please let me know. Congressman Corey Mills of Florida introduced H.R. 2337 this week, which would amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to clarify birthright citizenship. The congressman's office released a statement further explaining this act, which is titled the Prohibiting Automatic Rights to Enter National Territory Act, or the Parent Act, noting that it would ensure birthright citizenship is granted only to those born in the United States to at least one parent who is a citizen or a lawful permanent resident. And Congressman Andy Harris of Maryland is the co-sponsor. Birthright citizenship has really entered the mainstream dialect. I think a lot of people who are pro immigration restriction, whether that be only illegal or really legal and illegal, because there's a lot of ways that people abuse our legal immigration system. They have talked about this for a long time, but I think during the last election cycle, it became more of a mainstream conversation. I think when you say to people, hey, if someone who is visiting America has a baby here, should that baby be a citizen? You would say no. And then it opens the door to this conversation about like, well, if you intentionally come to this country so you can have a baby who has citizenship here, which gives you as the parent some sort of legal claim, even though you're not legally here, the wheels start turning. People start seeing why this is a bad idea. America is one of very few countries that have birthright citizenship. A lot of countries require a language, cultural, or parental tie. So I don't think it'd be weird if we got rid of birthright citizenship. I actually think it would benefit us. And I think it's cool that Corey Mills is taking this seriously. Congressman Mills' resolution is meant to be a companion or to build off of an executive order issued by President Donald Trump that was titled Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship. And the congressman's office said that his H.R. 2337 would close loopholes that have allowed illegal immigrants and criminal terrorist cartels to explore birthright citizenship and establish status in the United States. In a quote, Congressman Mills said, "For decades, criminal migrants have exploited loopholes in our immigration system, undermining our nation's sovereignty, straining taxpayer resources, and ignoring the rule of law. By amending the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Parent Act seeks to end abuse and reaffirm the principles of American citizenship and our constitutional republic. Building on President Trump's effort to protect American sovereignty, this bill ensures birthright citizenship is reserved for those with a legal right to be here. It's past time to restore integrity to our laws and put American citizens first." Congressman Mills is actually going kind of full force with immigration restriction this week. He also introduced the No Citizenship for Alien Invaders Act, and his office noted this act would prohibit immigrants of any nationality who have illegally entered the United States from ever obtaining legal citizenship. It's co-sponsored by Congressman Josh Breachin of Oklahoma, Andy Harris of Maryland, and Anna Paulina Luna of Florida. And Congressman Mills said, "Under the Biden administration, we saw more than 10 million encounters at our borders, a crisis exacerbated by reckless catch-and-release policies that allowed criminals who broke our laws to remain in the United States. President Trump has made it clear that anyone that tries to unlawfully undermine, exploit, or bypass our immigration system is a criminal. The No Citizenship for Alien Invaders Act will ensure that these criminals will never be granted United States citizenship. That privilege will be reserved for those who have respect for our laws." I think that's pretty cool. I think it's interesting. I'm sure that a lot of people will fight against this, but I'd be curious to see if this gains support, especially in the House or in the Senate. So look for this resolution as we move forward, especially since it hasn't really been picked up by the news cycle. Possibly the most interesting House resolution that was introduced this week is H.R. 2361. It's from Congressman Gerald Connolly. He's a Democrat from Virginia. And the resolution is looking to allow the televising of Supreme Court proceedings. So right now with the Supreme Court, it sort of varies, but you can listen in on some proceedings, on the presentation of arguments. But a lot of what happens in the Supreme Court, you either need to be there in person, you have a journalist in the room, or you kind of have to wait for statements from the Supreme Court and their staff. It is good in some ways because it might prevent the court from becoming a spectacle. On the other hand, if you believe in transparency in government, in this modern era, when we have the ability to discreetly televise in a way that's not disruptive to proceedings, why wouldn't you? Congressman Jerry Connolly introduced this bill on March 26th. It's titled the Cameras in the Courtroom Act, and it would ensure transparency and accountability in the judicial branch by televising open proceedings before the United States Supreme Court. It's a bipartisan companion bill for legislation introduced by Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois and Chuck Grassley of Iowa. In his statement, Connolly said, "Our nation's highest court is in desperate need of transparency and reform. The Supreme Court is not some mystical priesthood that can operate outside the public view. It is a co-equal branch of government and must be accountable to the American public. Our legislation strengthens efforts to restore trust in an institution that has for too long operated in the dark. It's time for cameras in the courtroom." And then Senator Dick Durbin said in a statement, "It's time to put cameras in the Supreme Court so Americans can finally see our arguments and decisions in cases that will affect them for generations to come. This bipartisan bill shines a light into the judicial branch of government so more than just a few hundred lucky Americans can watch the proceedings in the court's historic halls." Senator Grassley of Iowa said, "The judicial branch has a massive impact on our daily lives and the lives of generations to come, yet few Americans get the chance to see our nation's courts in action. allowing cameras access to the federal and Supreme Courts would boost transparency and help Americans grow in confidence and understanding of the judiciary. Honestly, I think the reporting on HR 2361 has been negligent. I am surprised we did not hear more about this week. Unfortunately, I just don't know that Connolly has the national name. I don't know that people know to look for him. I'll pull up his X account if he has one and see how active it is. But this is a major bill. I think it's really fascinating. It's obviously got bipartisan support in the Senate. It doesn't look like a Republican has signed on to it in the House, but I'd definitely be curious to hear more about it. And I think we should all seriously consider this. It's hard for me not to want more transparency, especially with the Supreme Court these days. I'm going to try and rapid fire through these last few. Congressman Brian Mast of Florida introduced HR 2377 to authorize the White House task force on celebrating America's 250th birthday with the establishment of a National Garden of American Heroes. In his statement, Representative Mast said, "I am proud to support President Trump's celebration of American heroes on our nation's 250th anniversary. The National Garden will be a beautiful site to honor our history and recognize prominent American founders and generations of trailblazers. America's past and present is filled with heroes from all walks of life, and this new garden will soon be open to the public to forever remember their contributions." This bill would allow for the creation and upkeep of this national site, establish a tax credit contribution fund, and enable the Secretary of the Interior to exchange and acquire land for the garden's location. So, location of the garden TBD, but very pro-America energy from this one. Congressman Bob Onder of Missouri introduced HR 2387, which would prohibit federal funds from being used for sex trait altering treatments for minors. The text of this bill is not available as of right now on congress.gov. Let's all definitely check back for it. Congressman Unger also doesn't have a statement as of right now, as of when I'm recording this video, on his website about it. I'm going to double check his X. If there's anything, I'll pop it in right here. And I will just keep checking back up on this. This seems kind of interesting. And finally, Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana introduced HR 2393, which would place a duty on imported Australian Wagyu beef and establish a reciprocal trade agreement between the United States and Australia as it concerns Wagyu beef. The text on this bill is not available, and I didn't see a statement on the congressman's website. This seems very specific to me. I would love to know more about this. If any of you are aware of what's going on there, please let me know. Wagyu beef from Australia is a top priority in the Senate this week, or in Congress this week. Very interesting. So that's a brief insight into some of the things happening in Congress for this week. There were 138 resolutions introduced in total. Not all of them will make it very far. In fact, a lot of them will not gain enough support. They'll get lost in committee. We'll never hear about them again. There are definitely several of these that I would love to see some serious action on. So if you like any of these, definitely reach out to your congressman. Let them know that you're interested in it. If you have any insight into what's going on with the Australian Wagyu beef, just for my own edification, let me know. And other than that, thank you so much for the support and for watching these. Let me know if you would like me to continue this series. It's as a weekly update on sort of what's going on in Congress. If you want to keep up with me in other platforms, I'm on X. It's the same handle, Hannah Claire B. I am normally with the quartering, and I do quartercasts on Rumble 3 times a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I will let you guys know that I am imminently expecting my baby, my first baby. So I could go into labor at any minute, which might mean that I'm not there in April, but I'll do my best to stay consistent on this channel. Thanks again for all your support. Have a great weekend.